Hi there folks, Sam here, and welcome to another recap of our Crozor Capital campaign. We had a few interesting experiences since the last time we've talked about it. We have had a couple of sessions, but they've been very kind of low-key, short, kind of chatty sessions rather than much dramatic happening. So if you remember the last session, we talked about how my players kind of through my offering had kind of circumvented the main kind of campaign finale. So they've been offered a chance, so they're basically told by some spies, "Don't worry about foiling the assassination attempt. We're going to do it. Relax." The players went, "Cool, that works for us." So we had a little chatty session where we talked about how the acting skill, the spies, and the players could work together. So I think one of them's getting training in kind of new magical techniques, using I think it's hone your skills or learn from master is the respite activity. Rolf has offered a plan, or he's offered to be like a sort of double agent in the Black Iron Pact, which they're considering, and I was left trying to work out how to balance the end of this campaign. Because I don't want to force them into something that they've said they're happy to let pass. But equally, I need to consider how best to run the campaign. So what I've ended up doing is I've kind of just asked the players what they're thinking, and I think they're of two minds. Half of them are like, yeah, let's just let the professionals handle it. Whatever happens, not our problem. And the other half are like, we should maybe just go anyway. And I was definitely kind of keeping open and suggesting that they could just go anyway and see what happens. And I think what I'm going to do, it hasn't happened in the campaign yet, but I'm going to have them receive a letter from their contact at the acting school just saying, hey, we're actually going on a mission, so we can't help you out over the next few weeks. And we're being deployed overseas. So their contacts will all go. And I'm tempted to give them a couple of tickets, or like maybe their names on a sign-up sheet for the summer fete as like gladiators or performers. Lets the players kind of go along anyway, and they can decide if they want to intervene. But there's also the subtext from the acting school of, well, why they told us not to go? Why are they giving us a way to go? And the idea is that character is suspicious of her higher ups, so she's thinking we're being sent away. We're the ones who know about this. Just in case, let's let these heroes go. We'll see how that pans out. But for the time being, they're still in their downtime. They're still crafting things, still exploring the place. And last session we had 4 out of 5 players. One was doing their learning from a master because their player wasn't present, and the rest of them were hanging around the villa, working out what they could do. And they returned to an earlier idea, where one of the PCs was killed by an Ankeg, now an Arix, and they were going to resurrect him with a resurrection scroll. And then they kind of, the player was less fussed, so they kind of put that in the back burner. But now they came back around and said they do want to do that. And I just asked them, like, what are their ambitions for these characters generally? Like, I think there's a sort of spectrum, and I guess we probably used to call it like sandbox to railroad, but I think it's almost I think the scale almost goes from director-led to player-led, which I realise is very similar, but I've definitely played with groups who prefer the director just to put down in front of them like what's happening. They're there to play RPG, they're wanting to just fight a few things and go through a very linear story and not have to think too much. Equally, some players, and I feel like I'm one of these players, love having ambition and saying, I'm playing the game where anything's possible. I want to be a king. I want to lead a guild. I want to forge a magic sword. All that kind of thing. And I definitely think Draw Steel is an RPG that leans more into that, and gives you lots of opportunity for your ambition, especially in downtime. But I just wanted to kind of prod the players that way and say, like, what do you envision for your characters? Let's say you get this resolved. I do think one of the weaknesses of this campaign has been again, the director-led part with me saying, oh, you want to find out who's really responsible. But they kind of know who's literally responsible. So I don't know if it's the strongest thing. They've definitely felt a lot better since they knew the task was save the prince. So I said to them, do you feel like you figured that out? Do you feel like you know who's responsible for the Lilac Night and so on? And they were like, yeah, kind of. But they kind of have a few like immediate priorities, like obviously save the prince. Francesca wants to find her mother. I think Sketch wants to look more into the Balanced Spring and see if she can make sure that the leader's dead. If not, she's going to do it. But broader than that, they started chatting about... To me, it seemed like they were all aligned, but they felt very different angles. But Francesca said she kind of wants to be a vigilante. She wants to be protecting people and doing things maybe not out within the system, but like saving people, being a hero, basically. Sketch was more like, I want to save people, but I want to go back to my sort of crime ways, but I want to be like Robin Hood kind of crime to an extent. Whereas Rolf was like, I want to take over a gang, I want to be a sort of mob boss, and yeah, people will benefit more under my rule than they would under someone else's, but it's less my concern. And I thought that was actually not a bad direction for them. Once this arc's done, if they want to press on and just have real sandbox playing Capital, where I'll set up a bunch of things that are happening, but it's up to them to decide what they're doing and how much to interact with that stuff. So that actually gave me a lot of hope and some promising direction for how I want to take the campaign forward. I do have kind of 3 angles I think we could come at it from, but knowing they want to stay in the city and make a difference, I'm tempted to go with that, or maybe do a very short arc on the other things before coming back to the sandbox. But finally on to the rest of last session, they want to make this resurrection scroll, and I'd said before they'd have to do research to figure out how to kind of make a scroll like that, because it's a higher echelon than they should have access to, but they're not really a party who want to necessarily go to priests or like kind of weird bargains. They kind of want to do a lot of like scholars in the party who want to just figure stuff out. So they worked together, and Francesca did some arcane research, while Sketch went, shaking people down, looking for ingredients, and they discovered that the main ingredient they need to make this ritual is dust from a painite. Now that's straight from the book. I think painite's a kind of stone, but as I discussed in a previous episode, I've decided it's a kind of demon. So they need to break out a demon summoner, and thankfully I already prepped all of that. So it says, hey, well, you're shaking people down, and Rolf had kind of learned this information anyway, we just changed it because of the timeline. You know how to find a demon summoner. There's one old Corrigan. He is in prison in Anso's Gate, ready to be hanged for, being a demon summoner. You could break him out, or find some other way to get him to do that for you. And they were quite happy to just do that. They're like, yeah, let's break out a demon summoner from prison. But I was wanting to do another test of the Arix, the Ankeg, and I'd thought about saying to them, right, Loco comes to the door, chaps the door, and says, you're not going to believe this, there's another one of these creatures, could you guys help again? But actually, when I was talking about the prison, and I think I might have mentioned that there was still some tremors in the area or something, but I talked about the prison, says, well, it's underground, there's no windows, and Rolf got to figure out the plan of the place, and I just showed them the map. I can't remember where exactly it came from. I think they think it was me, and I'm pretty sure it was them, but they suddenly went, we could use an Arix to burrow into the prison. At which point I was like, that sounds crazy, but I want to have that fight with an Arix, so let's get that on the road, let's get that going. So I was like, yeah, you could do that, yeah. It's up to you. You could, build things, like build some contraption that kind of spooks it that way and sort of drives the Arix to burrow into the prison. You could capture one and kind of try and tame it or something. I think I'm going to look into that, do some research, maybe make a retainer Arix. That could be interesting. Probably one that comes and goes as they need it rather than hangs around their villa. But anyway, so they kind of settled on the idea that maybe we can try and subdue it, but at the very least we can, we'll be able to use it for this one thing and send it to burrow into the prison. So we set up the Arix fight, and this time way easier. The players kind of knew what it was about. They knew it would come up and down, and they were just much more prepared. They also got surprised because they did a few really good checks to attract it. So it was beneath their villa in a kind of tunnel behind the basement, and they're like tapping the ground, very dune, and they managed to attract this Arix. And I said, right, you've managed to source poisons that will subdue it, but you need to get down to a third of its health. So kind of insert my own objective here. And they did. They did smashing, and they got it down to a third of its health, and that's where we called it for the week. So next week coming up, we're going to be burrowing into a prison. I'm probably going to keep it straightforward-ish, not too many surprises, and then from there, I'm going to put in front of them the Fet. They're going to get this invitation, or they're going to get this letter saying that the acting school or Il Vetro, their contacts, are going overseas. Here's a sign-up sheet to be performers or gladiators. It gets you in, and I'll then let them plot and plan, tell me what angle they want. I would be very surprised if they don't choose to be gladiators, once I contextualise that there's no sort of fighting to the death anticipated. But they could choose to be performers, and I've got with a few, maybe some montages to try and have, maybe one hard montage to how they perform and how they kind of blend in with the crowd. But if they choose to fight as gladiators, they'll be in the Colosseum. And I've already got one encounter I'm incredibly chuffed with, where it's a very gladiators recreating one of the ancient battles of the Killian Empire, and it's a kobold legion. Maybe they're reenactors, maybe they're a mercenary company, and they're defending one of the Emperor's eagles, and the players are going to play the barbarians trying to take it. So that looks really fun, and it's taking advantage of a lot of the kind of recent rules updates and the objective-based system introduced. So take the thing and they need to escape the map with it. So I'm excited for that. I think we're going for a few fun sessions, but we're kind of trying to wrap up this arc. We've got a few friends who are going away for a bit, or a few players who are going away for a bit on holidays, and we're wanting to not kind of run without them. And then one of our players is talking about stepping into the director's seat, maybe reviving an old campaign of theirs from 5e in Draw Steel, which I am very excited about. If we do that for a bit, I actually might still do these recaps, but for their campaign. Obviously, with more a player story recap and a kind of player experience recap than necessarily a director recap. But yeah, exciting times. We should be back to an episode a week, roughly. And until next time, cheers, folks.